Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTubers. This is Jerry Diamond with How to Get Out of Babylon. I would like to read for an hour at night, but I'm not going to be able to. I just can't see it. I'm going to try to do 15 minutes a night, maybe. The Enchanted hour will be the Enchanted 15 minutes, unless I get into a really good storyline. But this is going to be a hard book to read for me because, you know, it's a chapter. It's not just a story. It's a book about reading, so it's going to be hard to read. Yeah. Just because it's long and drawn out. Like chapter 1 is what reading to children does to their brains. I want to improve your brain, my brain, and your children's brain, your grandchildren's brain. That's my goal, is to, connect with my children and my grandchildren. Sorry about the squeaky chair. I gotta try to grease it down again. We try to connect with my children and their children, my grandchildren. So this first chapter is looking like 20 freaking pages. Yeah, pushing 20 pages, that's a lot. And it's not just a story. It's, like I said, it's a text. So I'm reading you a textbook. Understand that. I'm not just reading a novel. Okay, what reading to children does to their brains. Chapter 1. From the Enchanted Hour by Megan Cox Gurdon. Subtitle is The Miraculous Power of Reading Aloud in the Age of Distraction. Get the book if you want, and if you read to yourself, read it, or read it as an audiobook, or I'm reading it to you as an audiobook, I guess. So, all right. In the great green room there was a telephone and a red balloon and a picture of the cow jumping over the moon. And there were 3 little bears sitting on chairs. From Margaret Wise Brown's Good Night Moon, which, by the way, I'll be reading that to your kids, your children, and your grandchildren. Good Night Moon. So that's caught my attention, so I got it. Along with the Velveteen Rabbit, another thing. Might be reading some Winnie the Pooh, I don't know, whatever. I'll see what I do. Okay, in 1947, Christian Dior introduced the new look to women's fashion. Jackie Robinson signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers to become the first African-American player in the major leagues, and a company called Harper & Brothers published a quiet little bedtime story entitled Good Night Moon. It was a consequential year. Dior's innovation sparked an exuberant post-war fashion renaissance. Robinson's dignity and athleticism inspired the world, and the quiet little picture book went on to become the single most cherished text of modern babyhood. I never heard of it until I read this book. See how illiterate I am. Since its first appearance, Good Night Moon has sold what I believe is known in the trade as a gazillion copies. Generations of children have listened as a grown-up reads the droll, crystalline verses by Margaret Wise Brown that describes a little rabbit's bedtime routine of bidding goodnight to the things in his room. Innumerable small fingers have touched Clement Hurd's color-saturated illustrations of the great green room with its framed pictures, crackling fire, clocks, wide windows with green and gold curtains. Innumerable pairs of eyes have lingered over the oddments that make the scene so delectable and distinctive. The rabbit's tiger skin rug, the comb and the brush and the bowl full of mush, and the kittens playing with a skein of wool belonging to the old lady whispering hush. As the pages turn and the evening ticks on, a tiny mouse moves from place to place, and the bright moon rises in the starry sky outside. When my children were small, Good Night Moon was a big part of the evening ritual. I don't suppose we read it every night, but at this far removed time, it seems as though we did. The cadence of the verse became as familiar and comforting to us as an old stuffed animal. My chair sucks, my tripod sucks, my phone sucks, my life sucks. Oh well. Press on. All right, I was gonna get a new chair, but I gotta try to get one. This is just miserable. My shoes suck. Sorry, I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining. Just explaining, as my former friend once said. Okay. turn this damn thing without knocking it over. You don't need to read the board anyway. Okay. The cadence of the verse became as familiar and comforting to us as an old stuffed animal. The pictures, though, always had an element of novelty because we were always looking for something new in them. At some point when Molly was a toddler, she and I invented a game that we called quizzes. In the game, it was my job to try to stump her and later her siblings by asking them to seek and find obscure things in books such as Goodnight Moon. When the children were very small, it was enough of a challenge for them to spot the bowl or the flames or the pair of slippers in Clement Hurd's artwork. As they got older, I had to find more exotic objects and use more obscure language to keep the game going. Can you locate the two timepieces, I might say? A small figure would shoot out to touch one clock on the mantelpiece and another on the rabbit's bedside table. What about the andirons? That was a tricky one. I remember a long pause. At last I pointed to the mysterious objects in the fireplace, holding up the burning logs, and tried something else. Can you identify the second moon? Out went another finger, pointing to the tiny crescent in the picture of the cow jumping through the night sky. At the time I had no idea that our game was anything but a bit of fun. But we had in fact stumbled unknowingly into the foothills of a mountain of pedagogical evidence. It turns out that getting young children to interact with text and talking with them about the pictures and stories as you go hugely intensifies the benefits they get from the time you spend reading together. We'll look at this phenomenon in detail a bit later. Our fondness for Goodnight Moon feels very particular to our family in the way of the things we love in our own and our children's early years, but of course our attachment to it is just a tiny expression of its wider cultural significance. In the 7 decades since the book was first published, its words and pictures have suffused childhood to such a degree that social scientists have come to use the phrase "goodnight moontime" to describe cozy parent-child time in the evenings. That's goodnight moontime. Pajamas and toothbrushing, reading out loud and tucking in on the general imparting of security and love before lights out. And why not? Goodnight Moon is perfect for the purpose. It is soothing, it is lulling, its millions of parents have turned to it at bedtime, not least we can assume because it helps settle our children's minds into a state of placidity. Well, appearances can deceive. A child listening to a storybook while looking at the pictures may seem placid, but beneath that tranquility, as we shall see, lies an incredible dynamism. If you are looking for the polar opposite of the Great Green Room, you would not go wrong in identifying a certain chilled enclosure located deep in a research building attached to Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center on a hilltop in southwest Ohio. Having traveled along a gleaming hallway past an enormous cobalt wall fitted with video screens, and having passed through a series of blonde wooden doors, you would come to an antechamber and 2 chambers divided by a plate glass window. Let's call it the bland beige room. Hey, there are no jolly pictures of a cow jumping over the moon, no fireplace, no table lamp casting a pretty glow. Flashing lights and warning signs at the doorway hint at the seriousness of purpose of the place. In the first chamber, a desk stretches the width of the window, giving the technicians who operate its many monitors a good view of what's happening on the other side. Opposite in the second chamber is a kind of bed that is not the comfy sort occupied by the little rabbit in Margaret Wise Brown's story. This bed is narrow and designed so its young occupant can be secured in position. Before a child lies down, he gets fitted with soft yellow earplugs and a set of headphones, and then is fastened in place with a strap. Once recumbent, his body is slid into the circular aperture of a resonance imaging machine, or MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. I've been in one of them after my stroke. It was very cold. It was very refrigerated. I kept shivering. They kept, don't move. I said, well, I'm freezing. I'm shivering. There on his back, surrounded by the racketing sounds of vibrating magnetic coils, he responds in the deepest portions of his brain to the sounds he hears through the headphones, and to the things his eyes see projected on a little mirror fixed above his face. With a view of the child's small blanketed legs emerging from the machine, doctors, neurologists, radiologists, pediatricians, and researchers can capture on their computers every flash of his thoughts, every evanescent streak that travels from one part of his brain to another. These studies at the Cincinnati Children's Reading and Literacy Discovery Center are generating sensational insights into the effects of reading aloud on the developing brain. I'm not going to read very much longer. My voice is going. Among other discoveries, it seems that the thing we enthusiasts have long suspected is true. Reading aloud really is a kind of magic elixir. Half a dozen miles away, rain was falling on the Cincinnati neighborhood of Oakley as babies, toddlers, and their caretakers were pushed into the warm, colorful interior of a children's bookstore. In contrast to the antiseptic hospital chamber, the walls were covered with signed doodles and drawings left by visiting authors. The pictures didn't distract the rushing children whose object was to get to a central area that had been cleared of its armchairs and sofas to accommodate a weekly combination of a dance party and picture book read-aloud. "There she is! Look, there she is!" and one mother said, directing her daughter's gaze to a purple-carpeted dais where manager and storytime lady Sarah Jones was waiting with a guitar. Youthful and expressive, with her brown hair pulled back into a bun, Miss Sarah strummed a chord and beamed at the arriving hordes. A stunned-looking toddler in bib and striped pants stood beside her, face ripped up in guileless amazement. The child's older sister stood a short distance away in the same pose. Elsewhere, toddlers knelt, squatted on their heels, or climbed onto grown-up laps as Jones began shifting chords to signal that the event was about to begin. "Welcome, welcome, everyone," she sang, to the tune of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." "Welcome, welcome, everyone," adult voices chimed in. And some of the children started to dance as Jones continued, "Now we're here to have some fun." Fun was our purpose. Mine was observation. With my youngest child having hit double digits, it has been a while since I was immersed in the world of toddlers. I wanted to refresh my understanding of the ways they respond to stories in a group setting, and this was an ideal place to do it. Like me, the owner of the bookstore, Dr. John Hutton, has been reading aloud to his children for more than 2 decades. A pediatrician, he's also an assistant professor at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital and member of a triumvirate there, using functional magnetic resonance imaging to study the effects of reading aloud on children's cognitive development. The scene spread out before us was like a year's worth of esoteric MRI research brought to jumping, shouting life. Still strumming her guitar, Jones said, "All right, friends, I'm so happy to see all of you here this morning." She gave the strings a flourish, put down the instrument, and picked up a small stack of books. Leaning forward, she told the children that she was going to read them stories about sleepy farm animals, sleepy babies, and the sleepy solar system. "Can you guess our theme today?" she asked. The question brought a din of cries and yelps, all cheerful, none very coherent. The room by this time had just shy of 30 small children and about the same number of parents, grandparents, and babysitters. "First, we're going to start with a book called Sleepy Solar System," Jones said, displaying a front cover that showed 3 plump planets under a purple coverlet. "Nighty-night," someone shouted. A grandmother jogged a baby on her lap. One boy was still dancing. A few other children continued to churn around, but almost every face was directed toward the reader. "It's been a long, busy day in the starry Milky Way," Jones read aloud, stretching out the vowels. "Sleepy, setting sun calls out, bedtime, everyone." The whole scene with children entranced, parents involved, rhyming songs, and picture book stories was a perfect feedback loop of emotional stimuli and literary nurturing. Jones broke away from the story for a moment. "Can you guys yawn along with the sleepy planets?" Yawned all the children. Dr. Hutton leaned over to me and said, sotto vocal, "There are some days when Sarah is sick or can't come in, and some other poor soul has to try to entertain these kids. We've had tantrums. 'I want Miss Sarah! I want Miss Sarah!'" I laughed and turned back to watch the fray. In the book, the sleepy planets had settled down to rest in their nightcaps and curlers. "Yay!" the audience cried, applauding. A human brain was floating on the computer screen when I went to see Dr. Hutton later in his office at the hospital. It was the image of a child's cerebral white matter. And note here, Dr. Hutton is with her from the hospital. The guy at the hospital is in the children's reading time with Sarah. I see Dr. Hutton later in his office at the hospital. It was the image of a child's cerebral white matter, the nerve fibers of the brain that are sheathed in a protective material called myelin. a myelin sheath. That's why when that misfires, you have MS, multiple sclerosis. We had a friend that had that, and it was a myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is made of lecithin, a lot of oils. It's basically a oil sheath. Lecithin is a protein or a nutrient that the myelin sheath is made up of larger degree. So she took a lot of lecithin, and when I knew the whole time I knew her, she's fairly normal, but she used to just fall down and go into spasms and just lose all control of her muscles because her nerves were misfiring. They told her she was sick. She was imagining things. She was making it up. She was faking it for many years. She had like 100 tests, hospital test after hospital test. Finally, they found out it was MS. They put a name to it, MS, multiple sclerosis. The object on the screen was not shown as white despite its name, but was rich with color. It resembled a glowing deep water sea creature, a tangle of sensitive, delicate threads in psychedelic shades of azure, crimson, lime green, all suspended in inky nothingness. This is like a wiring diagram, Dr. Hutton explained, with a distinct lack of romance, pointing to the places where the threads had crossed and converged. Early experiences reinforce the connections and make the wiring stronger. Most of these things are going to develop normally because they are genetically programmed, but the strength of the connections, the myelination, the wrapping of the nerves, is very responsive to stimulation. There's a maxim in neuroscience. Nerves that fire together wire together. So, strengthen them. Go for 20 minutes. It can last that long. With a click, Dr. Hutton removed the sea creature and pulled up gray slices of brains. It was less gory than it sounds, as seen from underneath. Deep in the core of each image, I could see a small splash of scarlet shaped somewhat like a chili pepper. The red splashes varied in size from brain to brain. These images came from an exciting study that Dr. Hutton and his colleagues conducted a couple of years ago. They put a cohort of children between the ages of 3 and 5 through the scanner, one by one. This is a lengthy process that starts with the patient preparation of each child to ensure that he will stay motionless inside the machine. It can take up to 45 minutes. That's what I did to me. It's play-based, Dr. Hutton told me. We say things like, you're going into a rocket ship now, where you've got to sit really still and we're going to play the statue game. You need to play a statue. They couldn't get me to do that in the hospital. It was too cold. The researchers wanted to see what happened to the brains of these children when they heard age-appropriate stories read aloud. Which areas would be engaged? Would there be a difference in the neural response of children who had lots of experience being read to compared with those who didn't? The team discovered that brains of young children whose parents read aloud to them often and who had access to more children's books had more robust activation than their peers. In other words, the brains of well-read to preschoolers seemed more agile and receptive to narrative, suggesting that they had a greater capacity to process more of what they were hearing and at faster speeds. This was the first study to show that the early home reading environment, which is to say a child's access to books and frequency of shared reading with a grown-up, makes a quantifiable difference in brain function, and therefore it stands to reason in brain development. The researchers believe that because well-read to children have greater experience with language and imagination during story time, they will enjoy a cognitive advantage over peers who have not. A preschool teacher told me that she and her coworkers can always spot the well-read to children. They come in the morning and many of them will go straight to the books and say, "Will you read me this book?" And they're like looking for a lap, she said, at which point she stood up and waggled her bottom like a 3-year-old trying to find a seat. The scarlet chili peppers I saw in the pictures of these children's brains indicating greater activation, were localized to the left posterior hemisphere of the brain, in a realm known as the parietal temporal occipital association cortex. This part of the brain is involved with processing multisensory information, in particular visual and auditory. This was the area that Dr. Hutton and his colleagues found to be more active in children who'd been read to most. Strikingly, this particular study involved stories without pictures that children listened to through the headphones. Which suggested to the clinicians that activation in these visual processing areas represents imagination. Children with greater experience of being read to were, it seemed, better at summoning images in their mind's eye than young children who hadn't been exposed to lots of books read and reading aloud. That's it. Page 9. Okay, well that's it. I can't read anymore. I was dead tired when I got here, and I'm really dead tired. Squeaky, squeaky, geeky chair. I need to get a better chair, better tripod, better phone. I tried to get a better phone. Didn't work out. I have it. I'm going to pay for it. Don't ever go with T-Mobile. I also have an intelligent person in that entire company. Never found one. Anyway, all right. God bless everybody. Thank you. This is Jerry Diamond. If you're listening to this, you are the remnant. Extract cranium from rectal defilade. It's a do-it-DIY operation. Extract cranium from rectal defilade. Pull your head out of your ass. Get out of the cities. Get off the coast. Get rural. Get out of the cities. Get out in the country. Learn how to survive. Put together a cart so you can walk. Have your car with good stuff. Have something you can use as a walking mechanism for carrying stuff. I'm telling you, people, it's gonna blow. The lid's gonna blow off here before long. I feel it. I know it. I sense it. All things are pointing to it. If you're still asleep, wake up. Okay. And even my children don't know what's going on. They have no clue. My oldest son is like, doesn't know what the word diamond means. Anyway, Yahweh bless everybody. Good night. I'm going to go to sleep here if I keep sitting here. Bye.